Over the last 24 hours, the world has been marking World Press Freedom Day. But the minority in Ghana's parliament is blaming the majority for the stalemate in the passage of the Right to Information Bill, according to its leader, Haruna Iddrisu. But for the last-minute opposition put out by the New Patriotic Party minority in the Dem Parliament, the NDC would have passed a bill before the 6th Parliament ended last January. The bill, which would improve access to public information for journalists and the citizenry, has spent well over 10 years in the process of passage. With a new parliament coming into force, however, the whole process would have to be started again. And Mr. Iddrisu, speaking at an event on Wednesday to mark International Press Freedom Day, said a lot more needs to be done to make sure the bill is passed.
This year, the world is marking Press Freedom Day on the theme Critical Minds for Critical Times, Media's Role in Advancing Peaceful, Just and Inclusive Societies. In Ghana, focus was on getting answers on why Parliament has failed to pass the Right to Information Bill.
The absence of a right to information law inhibits our ability to challenge our rulers, to ask for details. It has taken so long for the media to wake up to what is happening in our countryside, that our rivers are dying, because it takes too long to ask the questions and find the answers.
The bill has been in the process of passage for a decade, going back and forth between two of Ghana's leading parties in the lawmaking house.
And I'll urge you, President of GJ and your colleagues, to read the parliamentary Hansard of the 4th, 5th, 6th and 7th January of Parliament before the swearing-in of the new government. The Honorable Dua Jaho, when he took his chair as Speaker of Parliament, then moved to what he called the final consideration stage of the Freedom of Information Bill. That was to give a terminal end to the process of completing it for us to await presidential assent. We say it as it is. At the time, I'm sure the minority then had become the majority. So they said, no, we won't cooperate with you. Why all this while you didn't pass the Freedom of Information Bill? We will frustrate you. So it became the politics of legacy, whose legacy it will be to get a Freedom of Information Bill. Ghana is above that petty partisan politics.
But the majority, which until last January was the minority, now says it is committed to pushing the bill through, according to its deputy leader, Sarah Adjoa-Safo.
As we push for this passage of this bill to be promulgated, I believe that the hard-earned reputation of people should not be compromised. Because if you look in Article 162 downwards, 163, 164, it also talks about the responsibility of the media.
Ghana is 26th on the list of countries with free space for the press, better than relatively advanced countries like France and the United Kingdom. But that freedom has yet to show on the work of the media.
One fundamental thing that Ghanaians probably doesn't know is that there is that involved in our work. It's very tedious. And then politicians delving into journalism practice, trying to use legal issues to stampede our work. As a journalist, when you are investigating or trying to unearth an issue, they use the caveat of defamation to more or less, cut your wings of what you want to do.
I think it's time the media, the public have access to information for accountability, as the coalition member, Mina Mensah, said. I think it will be good for our democracy as citizens and as media people.
But for media academic Dr. Audrey Gajepo, passing a Right to Information Bill is only the first step to solving a bigger problem.
The bill that was supposed to be passed, there were still concerns about some of the provisions in that bill that would undermine the strength of the bill. especially in some of the exemptions. And it will be very important to take this second opportunity for Parliament to quickly reconsider some of those issues in order to pass a stronger bill. If we've had to wait another year, then it must be an improved bill that that we get in the end. The readiness then, after the bill is paid, to implement the bill so that it makes it meaningful to ordinary citizens and the media. And what I mean by that is that what is the readiness of our ministries, departments, agencies, state entities, so that when I walk in the door and ask for a particular piece of public information, they have it.
As the flags are raised, journalists at today's occasion of Press Freedom Day would mark time, hoping the politicians would keep to their promise.
Well, we turn our attention onto health, and severe blood loss, unsafe abortion and hypertension are said to be the leading causes of maternal deaths in Ghana. The incidents have since increased in 2016 as compared to the year before. As a result, health practitioners at a review meeting to assess the performance of all health sectors are putting in place measures to reduce the number of mothers who die during childbirth. We bring a report by Patricia Gasu.
Health experts are blaming the lack of skilled medical care during childbirth for the rise in maternal mortality cases in the country. After-birth bleeding is also said to be a common reason many mothers lose their lives. Health professionals say ending maternal mortality is a priority that needs urgent attention.
Maternal mortality ratio was high in 2016. This is because when you look at the absolute figures, even though the absolute figures have dropped from 208 in the previous year, 2015, to 197, when we calculate the ratio, because we always relate the maternal mortality to the number of deliveries, when we calculate it with the ratio of the number of deliveries, then we realize that the number of women who have come to deliver and who lost their life had increased. So the ratio is currently 180 per 1,000 live birth for institutional delivery, compared to 2015, where it was 177 per 1,000 live births. So the situation has partially worsened.
At a performance review of the health sector, practitioners indicated they are putting in place strategies that will help achieve high survival of both mothers and their babies. But the healthcare professionals say they are challenged in a number of ways.
Apart from the community, when you come back to the facilities themselves, we don't seem to have the emergency drug. There are always one problem or the other. Sometimes we don't have adequate staffs. The experts, the specialists that we need, the doctors that we need to be by the bedside of the patient may not be available. We may not have adequate midwives. Sometimes our facilities are too small. So when the patients come, maybe you take 1 or 2 patients, you don't have space to take more. But most times we are full. And so when they want to bring high-risk cases that we think that should be the ones who come to us, we are unable to receive them. So it's a whole system-wide challenge that we have. And so to be able to address this, we need to really look at the system. What systems can we put in place to make sure that mothers, once they get pregnant, they go to the hospital to have their blood pressures checked. And once they're in the hospital, if they need emergency drugs, the drugs are available. And then what also can we do to make sure that the doctors are available, the midwives are available in adequate numbers to look after these patients?
To support effort to save mothers, Dr. Sroponyo is appealing to Ghanaians to donate blood.
I can never overstress the need, because unlike other medications where we can just go and buy and stock in the pharmacy to use to treat the women, as for blood, scientists have not been able to manufacture blood, and so the only source of blood is when another human being donates the blood to be used to save the life of another person. There is no other source. And so unless we Ghanaians come forward, if we want our own sisters, our mothers to stop dying as a result of hemorrhage, then we as Ghanaians have to come forward and donate blood so that it will be used to save the life of the others.
In other stories, priests in areas affected by illegal mining in the central region have launched what they call Operation Touch Heaven with prayers to end galamsey. Speaking at a news conference at Jokwa in the central region, the Catholic priest called on the religious bodies in the country whose members are engaged in galamsey to call them to order. According to the priest, the fight against galamsey could not be sustained if the media spearheading the fight are not fortified with prayers. Richard Kojonyako has more.
is supported by traditional authorities in the area, led by the priest in charge of the Immaculate Heart of Mary Grotto, want churches and other religious bodies in the country to go beyond just throwing a challenge to government to fight the Galamsey menace, but also activate series of intercessory prayers to support the media that is at the forefront of the crusade. Beyond the prayers, the priests want these religious bodies to talk about Galamsey and its impact to their members who are in the Galamsey business in order to end the practice. Speaking at the launch of the Operation Touch Heaven with prayers to end Galamsey, spokesperson of the priest and the priest in charge of the Immaculate Heart of Grotto, Reverend Father David Pinto, tells Joy News the current battle against Galamsey cannot be won if the media is left to use only their might to do it.
Today, we are launching a spiritual crusade on Galamsey. A spiritual crusade I have dubbed Operation Touch Heaven with prayers to end Galamsey. We know very well that the government and the media have taken the initiative to end this menace. But we are also much aware that the whole issue is very complex. We need divine intervention. We need help from above. Our brothers, sisters of the Christian denomination and also the Islamic denomination. We should rally together and then fight this menace of Galamsey. And we're doing that through prayer. We're going to support the government with prayer. We're going to support the media with prayer.
Some concerned citizens in the Talansi district of the Upper East region say they've had enough of deaths resulting from minor accidents in the area and want a local mining company, the Chinese Mine Support Service Company, which they accuse of causing the deaths, expelled from the community. At a news conference at Shega Tuesday, they called on government to seriously scrutinize documents Shanxi Mining is using as legal backing to operate because they are unsure of their credibility. Upper East region correspondent Abasori was there and our reports.
Weeks ago, 7 men said to be illegal miners died in a mine accident linked to an underground blast by the Chinese Mine Support Service firm. In separate interviews with Joy News, local miners blamed the Shanxi Mining Company for the accident, but the company denied responsibility. It wasn't the first time such a fatal accident had occurred, and the company has been accused on several occasions. The residents say they have had enough and want the company out. Charles Boazo addressed a press conference on behalf of the concerned Talansi citizens.
The state authorities, they don't want the Ghanaian authorities to know the actual truth of what they are doing over there. Else, the state authorities would have gotten them out of this place a long time. It is the reason why we are here. In fact, the Honorable Minister for Lands and Natural Resources has written them a letter suspending their operation because of the recent death they have caused. As we talk right now, we have a corpse to bury. They can't deny it. They are always denying. Anytime we cry, anytime we have dead bodies to bury, which we know they are behind it, they will deny.
Last week, Joy News was presented with copies of documents indicating that 2 Ghanaian concessionaires, Yenyaya and Pubotaba mining groups, acquired licenses to operate as small-scale miners at Bani. Each concessionaire was given 25 acres of land within which to operate. Owner of the Yenyaya mining group, Charles Ndambun, told Joy News he, together with his other counterpart at Pubotaba Mining Group, brought in the Chinese Mine Support Service firm to provide technical support services to them. The Talansi citizens are, however, challenging the credibility of the company's documents.
We had them 2009, that they signed agreement with us to give a technical support service. And I think from 2009 up to date, they have been given a technical support service. And our operation here is mainly for underground. We don't destroy surface because if you see a machine that is moving along this area, that means that we want to clear a place, either construction, or we want to clear it for maybe piling our ore. We don't destroy the land because our operation is underground.
The Shanxi Mining Company tells Joy News it will soon respond to the claims made by the Talensi citizens at the press conference. But there are growing fears that if government does not intervene, the standoff could result in a clash. Reporting for Joy News, Albert Sori, Bolgatanga.
Before we go, mass appeal seems to be dictating the pace of politics. There are several examples from recent elections across the globe, an indication of public disaffection for the normal status quo. Well, thus, and we have some correspondents. And Thomas Sparrow is a political correspondent of our partner station, DWTV, bringing us to speed on how this phenomenon has also impacted European politics. He says although parties with mass appeal are rising, there are still hurdles to be surmounted if they are to equally compete with traditional political parties. He spoke on the Pulse with Gifty Ando-Apia.
It is clear that populist groups in Europe have made their mark, that they become more influential, that they're a challenge for traditional parties here in Europe. But you also have to see national differences in Europe. It is clear, for example, that Brexit has been very important. Politicians there in favor of Brexit used a populist agenda. It is also clear, for example, that the election of Donald Trump in the United States influenced political parties here as well. But you had, for example, the recent election in the Netherlands, and you had the recent elections in Austria, the presidential elections there, where populist parties were not as successful as the mainstream parties.
How would you say it has impacted the French elections, and how is it likely to impact the elections in Germany?
Well, it has clearly impacted the French elections. We can see that when we see, for example, the results that Mrs. Le Pen had in the first round. We see that also, for example, in the way traditional parties performed. They are having a very bad time. In fact, both candidates for the second round are unconventional candidates, if you will. So it is obviously clear that populism has left its mark in France, although it is also improbable, at least from what analysts say, that Mrs. Le Pen will actually win in the second round. It seems that Mr. Macron will actually win, and he's a unconventional politician, but still someone who is in favor of European politics and European Union. When you ask about Germany, we have the Alternative for Germany, the AfD, that's the anti-immigrant party. They are trying to get into the federal parliament for the very first time in the elections in September. It is probable that they will reach the 5% mark to get into the parliament, which for them would be a success. But it is clear that in the last few months they have also lost some support, in particular as Germans are not so worried about, for example, the refugee crisis or other issues that they benefited from in the past. It is clear, for example, that they have tapped into certain fears that Germans may have when they first started back in 2013. Those fears refer to the euro, for example, or the way that the German government and other European governments handled, for example, the situation in Greece. And then obviously their popularity increased a lot, and they managed to get some very important results at a regional level when Germany was facing the refugee crisis. But as those topics have shifted, as the debate has also shifted, they have indeed faced some popularity problems, but it's not the only reason. They've also got internal problems and internal divisions. We saw that only a few days ago in their party congress in the city of Cologne. So those are reasons why we can explain that they have had certain problems. Their main goal, as I said, is to enter the federal parliament in the September 24 elections, and they're aiming actually at getting that 5% hurdle.
And that's Thomas Sparrow of the DWTV, bigger sister partner station in Europe. But we have to talk a lot more on many of the issues about populism in politics, etc. But before we do all that, we'll have to say that's the news this morning. We have a lot more news. We'll be reviewing the newspapers. We'll look at stories with the online portals. I'll be joined by Mama View Sobwaje in Orange.